Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Luke from Astro Awakening. In this video, I'm going to discuss a couple of things, actually. We've just come through the lunar eclipse. It's Monday, the 30th of October. It's 5:16 a.m. We had the lunar eclipse on the wee hours of Sunday morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the lunar eclipse. But before we get to that, I want to address an issue that I see coming through social media a lot lately in relation to the constellations. And, there was one video about the Earth has stopped rotating because we're still in Virgo and we're supposed to be in Scorpio and we're in Virgo. And look, and they use stellarium, sorry, not solarium. They use stellarium to prove this point. So I want to quickly use a chart to address the difference between the constellations and the zodiac and why there is a difference and what that means and what, Western astrology focuses on and why. So I want to get that clear right at the beginning because there's so much misinformation out there. And it's really for those people new to astrology, new to the journey of spiritual awakening, can be quite misleading and difficult to navigate. And there was another one as well, which I won't really go into in this video, which was a woman saying that she was an ex-astrologer and astrology is demonic and all this. And I'm just like, oh man, these people. The problem is knowledge is very dangerous when you don't have the understanding to underpin it. So there is so much information and knowledge out there, but true wisdom comes through the understanding of that knowledge. And when it's misunderstood, misrepresented, or if there's only a little bit of knowledge in context to a really big picture, fucking people get taken off their path very easily. So I'm going to just deal with the constellations in this video. And then after we've done a little bit of talk about the lunar eclipse that we just had and why we can feel the way we do and what to expect, and also why there's this heaviness going on. Hello, Saturn. I want to just go back to the solar eclipse and look at the transits in context to that chart. So every time there's an event, whether it's a solstice, an equinox, a 9/11, a birth, there is a chart that you can create for that moment. So if we create a chart for the moment of the solar eclipse that we just had in Libra, what we can do then is we can track the movements of the sun and planets as they transit in relation to that eclipse chart. And that can bring forth a lot of information. I want to look at that chart for two reasons. There's a couple of dates coming up that I feel we should be focusing on in relation to potential events and timing of certain things. So we're going to take a look at that. This isn't going to be a very long video. It's 5:20 in the morning, so hopefully we can get it done before 6 a.m. Okay, so first, to begin with, let's take a look at this chart here I have, which is the equinox chart. It's when the sun moved into the 0 degrees of Aries. Thank you for the beautiful men and women at Astro Gold, Esoteric Technologies, for their software. It's phenomenal, and I can just bring up that chart, click of the finger. This birth chart is the birth chart for when the sun moved into Aries this year, and it was on the 21st of March, 2023 at 7:24 a.m. That's the equinox. That begins the start of the zodiac. The sun, as you can see from this chart, is in the sign of Aries. The moon on that day was, we were coming into a new moon, very close to a new moon, but not quite. The moon was over in 18 degrees of Pisces. And this is the location of all the planetary bodies on the day and the moment that the sun ingressed into Aries. This here creates the equinox. Now, I'm going to use some magic markers. This would be the sun in Aries at 0 degrees Aries of the zodiac. In the sky, the fixed constellations at the moment, right here, we have, this would be this constellation of Pisces. My drawing is going to be pretty ordinary, so do forgive me for that. Then, and Pisces is quite a big constellation, right? So then we had Aries constellation, and after that, we would have had the Taurus constellation. Now, if it's better for you to understand, these are the constellations are created by the fixed stars. And they're the fixed stars in the sky. The fixed stars, right? They're pinned to the firmament. My belief is that fixed stars rotate as the sun and planets move through or along the path of the ecliptic, north and south declination. Excuse me, I'll just put this one in here. This is Aquarius. Fixed stars are fixed, so their relation to one another is always fixed. It never moves. Their relation to the Earth, however, will rotate within 124-hour period, because we'll see the stars rising with the planets and as they go across the sky. Now, they'll tell you that the Earth is rotating. My belief is that it's not. My belief is that everything is in a state of motion except for physical matter. Physical matter is the resting place for energy. So energy, the conservation of energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but it can be in different states. And when energy is trapped within matter, we have energy in its fixed state. It's low vibrational. In fact, it's coming down to such a low vibrational speed that it becomes physical. So as it's liberated from physical matter back into potential, it moves then into a higher vibrational rate. That's why there is a speed of light. Is there a speed of matter? No, there is a speed of light, and it's very fucking fast. But let's just put here Capricorn. Now, I'm not going to go right around this whole thing, but you get the point, right? So the constellations in the sky follow the same sort of order as the zodiac. However, there is a difference here. Now, our ancestors, the wise wisdom keepers of the past, were very, very clever, because what they did was they observed natural phenomena here on the physical Earth plane, right? And they correlated that to particular symbolic wisdom. Okay, so they noticed the rise and fall of, certain things, the cyclical nature, the way that nature works, and they tied it into the movement of the sun, moon, and planets through the fixed constellations. And they worked out that at the point of 0 degrees Aries, the alpha point of the zodiac, right? That point, it's around March 22nd, 21st, every single year, is the equinox, where there's equal sun and equal night, right? So equal day, equal night at that point. That is an observable phenomena that we can look at here on Earth, and we know when that's going to happen. We can time it. We can count the hours in the day and count the hours in the night and go, wow, we must be at the equinox now, because they are equal. It's balanced. So they noticed that at a particular time of the year, now, Northern Hemisphere, because all of these cultures and traditions and societies, or whatever you want to call it, have sprung out of the center or the north of, I think it's the center of the Earth, perhaps, or that central point. So Northern Hemisphere is where they base this sort of understanding of what? The understanding of consciousness, the understanding of the metaphysics of the energetics, right? Our ancestors, the wisdom keepers of the past, they spent lifetimes, centuries, longer, just observing and recording. Now, if you want to record something and have it last, let's say that the wisdom keepers of the past worked out how the physical plane works, the ebbing and flowing of the cycles, the rising and falling of nations, how to plant crops and when they are going to be good crops, when they're not going to be good crops, when is a good time to invade a particular, when's a good time to build, when's a good time to move, when's a good time to get away from things, like based on what? They're not got clocks, they're not got calendars and dates. They've created that, right? Through what? The observation of the sun, the moon, the stars. Absolutely. So what they wanted to do then was record it. And, you can get a bit of bark off a tree and write it on there, and you can carve it into a stone. But when you are dealing with physical matter, you're dealing with energy in its final resting place. So everything that is physical, the Maya, the illusion, is the physical plane. Why? Because it is not eternal. When things come into their final resting place, their next pathway they must take for the energy to be liberated from matter is death. death or the breakdown, the destruction. Even the oceans are eroding the lands. Even the rocks are facing the elements and the weather and the erosion and the wind and the rain and the sleet and the snow and all of it. Everything is constantly changing here. So to record something physically is to know, as an ancient wisdom keeper, that it's not going to be eternal. So what they did, they recorded it into the stars. They recorded it, right, into the stars. They noticed that particular alignments meant particular things. They worked it out and they based those symbols on their observable phenomena. Hey, when the sun moves into this part of equal day, equal night in spring every year, well, all the crops start bursting out. New life, the birds start singing again. The ram, wow, look at that ram. The ram's born and look how headstrong and they are. Look at those crazy, that ram is just, it doesn't hold back. It just, you walk into a pen of a ram or a field where there's a ram, it's going to charge you head first. The ram is a really good symbol to personify the energy of Aries this time of the year, right? So they then, at the the alpha omega point of the seasonal change, the equinox, they were able to understand that this is what that particular period of time refers to. Now, when we're in the age of Aries in the constellation is actually down here at the moment, they've superimposed that knowledge, that wisdom, that sky law into the stars of that constellation. Now, here's the thing. This point here every year is retrograding through the constellations at a rate of 72, every 72 years, 1 equals to 1 degree of movement backwards. So now we have a marker, because every year we can measure the equal day, equal night when the sun is in Aries. Okay, the equinox, it's always in our March. Our calendars are pinned to this date. So we know that that date is going to move through the constellations every 72 years, 1 degree. 1 degree. Now, the constellations are different sizes, whereas the zodiac, right, which is based on the constellations, if you like, or at least the constellations have been based on the zodiac, either way you look at it, are different sizes, where the zodiac is actually split equally along 30-degree sections of the sky, right? Or the ecliptic is the apparent path the sun takes through the sky, right? So the ecliptic, the sun is going to move north or south of the ecliptic depending on the season. North, it's going to be our northern hemisphere's summer. Our southern hemisphere's winter. South, it's going to be the northern hemisphere's winter, southern hemisphere's summer. So at the moment, we're over here, opposite point, right? Over here, we have another equinox, but this is the Libra equinox, right? So this is the northern hemisphere's autumnal equinox, and it's the southern hemisphere's spring equinox. With the zodiac, right, we have a circle of 360 degrees. Each sign is allocated 30 degrees along the ecliptic from the equinox, starting with Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, the sign opposite Aries. Then we move into Scorpio season. We're in Scorpio now. So currently the sun is, we've just had that. So it's about here at the moment, moving through, right? Scorpio, the sun is moving through Scorpio. Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and then back to Aries. The constellations aren't divided by 30 degrees because there's no boundary, but there's no definite boundary between one constellation and the next. If you look at stellarium, if you look at stellarium, you'll notice that the caricatures and the symbols and things that they put up in there, they're all of different sizes, they overlap each other. That's the star law. That's this fixed. They're fixed. That's where they've written this knowledge into that. They've superimposed it into that. It's fixed. But it's also very, like, Pisces is one of the biggest constellations, and Virgo is another big constellation on this other side, right? They're probably two of the biggest. So at the moment, every year when the sun moves into Aries, the constellation that we are in is the last decan or the last decan of Pisces. Okay, technically now, in the constellation. So that means when the sun moves into Aries, every spring equinox in the north, every autumnal equinox in the south, we're in the constellation of Pisces. So if you were to just look at the sun in relation to the constellation, you go, oh, wait, hang on, it's in Pisces. Why is the sun in Pisces? Yeah, it's supposed to be Aries season. Because here's the thing, there is a different motion between the ecliptic and the sun's path and the solstices and equinoxes and the constellations. And there is this retrograding back every 72 years, 1 degree. Okay, every 72 years, 1 degree. That's called the precession, preside backward motion through the zodiac. When we were in the age of Gemini, another name for Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is Buddha. This is where the rise of Buddhism, right? Because Buddhists are all about controlling what? Mindfulness. That's Gemini. After that, we had the rise of Hinduism, because this is the cow. This is the bull, Taurus, right? And they find the cow what? The Hindus don't eat the cow. Sacred, because that religion stemmed from the age of Taurus. We had the age of Aries. You've heard me talk about this many times. If you want to understand what happened between the age of Aries and the age of Pisces, this transition between the ages, watch the Game of Thrones. The Game of Thrones is you sit on the Iron Throne to rule the 7 kingdoms. 7 kingdoms, 7 traditional planets in astrology. And you have the houses, the Lannisters and the Starks, right? The houses, what are they? They're zodiac signs. And in the age of Aries, ruled by Mars, okay, Mars is the god of war. You live and die by the sword. The metal that rules Mars is iron. You sit on the Iron Throne, right? It's made of swords. They're really telling you what age they're in. And then we had what happens, spoiler alert, right now, if you haven't watched the Game of Thrones, do not watch the next little bit. I'm going to spoiler alert. But what happened? What happened at the very end of that? The cripple sits on the throne. The cripple is Pisces. Pisces is the cripple. If there's a disabled aspect of like the signs in archetypal form, it's Pisces. So that is a depiction of the age of Aries, right? Which was when we were in the age of Aries, every spring equinox, the sun at spring equinox is in the zodiac sign of Aries and the constellation of Aries. But that happens for a period of about 2,150 years every 25,000 years, because it takes 25,000 years for this equinox point to retrograde through the signs. The person that was putting up the post saying, we're still in Virgo, right? The constellation of Virgo, the sun may have been in, but the zodiac sign is Scorpio at this time. We are not in the zodiac sign. The zodiac is irrespective or independent of the constellations. There are 2 things happening here. Okay. So another thing to think about is that the constellation sizes are very big. They're not divided into 30-degree segments. And there is a lot of conjecture around the boundaries of the constellations and where one ends and one begins. There is no consensus in the astrological community to say that's the beginning and that's the end. This is my understanding, is if we were to superimpose 30 degrees on the constellations and divide them equally, we are technically in the age of Aquarius, already in the age of Aquarius. Now, I've done a live talk on this. I'm not going to go into this video. Maybe it's a video for another time, but I'll give you an understanding of why, if we're in the age of Aquarius, why aren't we in the age of Aquarius? Why have they kept us consciously in the age of the sleep and belief in Pisces? That's an interesting conversation. We'll save that for another video. So my point being on this, to recap, is that when the sun moves into Aries every year, we have the start of the zodiacal, precession, or the zodiacal season. We have 0 degrees Aries every equinox, because 0 Aries, 0 Libra are always dividing the year, right? When the sun moves into Libra, we are balancing the season, we're balancing the year, we're balancing it, right? It's equal day, equal night, and there is this judgment that happens, right? This is judgment day here when the sun moves into the equinox on Libra. In Aries, it's the alpha point, it's the beginning. And in the Northern Hemisphere, this is when all life is beginning. It's springtime, right? All the new birds are being born, the crops are rising from the soil, the sun's starting to come back. So this period every year is not based on what constellation we're in. Oh, hang on, we're not ready to go into spring yet. No, well, we are, because there's equal day and equal night. There is different cycles and modes of speed and development at play here. And here on the physical Earth plane, this point here is, well, you could look at it like this. At the equinox, perhaps the constellations are slowly in like rotation around the Earth, giving us the idea that we are moving through the constellations. Perhaps the constellations move, if you want to look at it like from a physical plane, stationary plane Earth perspective. Perhaps that's just how to flip that script. It's like, we're not moving, it's moving. But it's moving at what? If the constellations are moving, they're moving at what? They're moving at 72 degrees 1 degree every 72 years in a reverse motion from the equinox point. So there are 2 things happening. The zodiac is your star sign. The constellations are the great year or epoch markers. This is the marker, right? So that phenomenon of how metaphysically consciousness expresses itself at this Aries point is always going to be the same. And where our ancestors superimpose that knowledge, because if they put it in rock, stone, paper, papyrus, whatever, it's going to perish eventually. So where do you put it so it becomes eternal? Put it in the sky. You put it in the stars. And that's what they did. They superimposed this information into the stars. They know that the constellations don't move. The planets do, of course. The zodiac does within the constellations, but they are telling you that that point every year that moves is the point of Aries. That's an Aries point. That's an Aries expression of the sign. And likewise, all the other ones follow in order. So where do they put that information? They fix it to the constellation of Aries. And just because we're not in the constellation of Aries doesn't mean we're not in Aries season, right? So that's a distinction to make. Now, we're moving towards the end of, well, we probably already have transitioned into the beginning of the age of Aquarius. We move out of the age of belief. Belief is something you need when you don't know. We move into the age of knowing in Aquarius. Knowing is something that you know. You don't need to believe when you know. Someone's asked me about, like, oh, you might be wrong. When it comes to life and death and the transition of the soul and the reincarnation process, I don't believe I know. Why? Because it's the work I do and regression work. And now I have enough of my own understanding and experience and knowledge that I can apply that to wisdom. I know. I don't have to believe anymore. I know. We are in the age of waking up. This is the water bearer. This is the man of the zodiac, right? Pouring forth the wisdom of the sky. It's time for that sky law knowledge to come down for everyone. Now, what's happened, right, is that certain people have gained this knowledge and then created another web that lays over us. And they've designed our days, our weeks, our months. They've designed the calendar. They've designed the idea of work. They've designed the matrix system, the government system, the education, the financial systems. They've designed them with this knowledge. And then what have they done? They've ostracized and outcast astrology completely from that system. You don't get taught it in schools. It's in magazines as a horoscope. It's very, non-specific, non-generic, right? It's ostracized. It's outcast. It's woo-woo. It's pseudoscience. It's bullshit. Why would that system want to give you that perspective? Because that knowledge is the ancient wisdom knowledge. That's the knowledge of the liberation of your soul. Liberation means the freedom of what? The cycle of birth and death and reincarnation? Yeah. Now, why would they not want you to know that? Because they want to fucking harvest your energy and your consciousness for their gain. When something comes up through social media now and it's about, oh, we're still in Virgo, that's someone with a little bit of information expressing it as knowledge, thinking that they're smart or wise. What are they lacking? Understanding. They don't have the understanding. If you look at the tree of life, you have wisdom and understanding. Wisdom is Chokmah, understanding is Binah. Chokmah is the Zodiac, right? Binah is Saturn, the boss, the authority. Wisdom, understanding. That's the key here. In between, you have the magic missing Sephiroth, known as Darth, right? Darth Vader, which is what? Knowledge. The link between wisdom and understanding is knowledge. But a little knowledge without wisdom or understanding, and it is being perverted. And awakening souls now, because we're going through this, are coming to this understanding, they're coming to this knowledge, and they're being misdirected by cretins that don't have the understanding. So be very mindful of where you get your knowledge from. So I give you some information. We've just gone through the lunar eclipse. Why lunar eclipses tend to be a bit of a heavy feeling? Because solar eclipses tend to relate to external events, circumstances. The solar eclipse, around that period of time, we had the uprising of the conflict or the reignition of the conflict in the Middle East. So it's going to be interesting to check that chart. This is the lunar eclipse chart, right? To have a look at some timing of some particular pathways and events as that manifests. But when we get to the lunar eclipse, let's have a look at the lunar eclipse. So we just had the lunar eclipse. The moon is still in Taurus. The moon is exalted in Taurus. But when we get this lunar eclipse energy, you tend to get more of an internal emotional energy that sort of, it's like stuff's coming up for us to process, to move through, to balance, to purge. And we tend to have more of an internalized experience or a heavier of a physical or emotional experience around eclipses. And I know through my own social media and the community that I've created, a lot of feedback of like overwhelm and fatigue and worn out and just like, and a lot of heavy stuff people are dealing with. When we're in Scorpio season, we're dealing with heavy emotions. We're dealing with the deeper, darker emotions. We're dealing with death. We would have had some mass shootings that have come out through Scorpio season. I know a few people recently close to me have had family members pass, some very unfortunately through suicide. It's just very, you're dealing with a lot of the taboos, a lot of the things in life that are challenging and difficult. This is the area of life that for most people, 11 out of 12 people, because they're not Scorpios, tend to, avoid. They don't want to deal with that stuff. They want to just distract themselves in the pleasantries and the comforts of this social sort of system that we live within, the social veneers, basically. Whereas the Scorpio and those with a lot of Scorpio in their charts can live within that place of like, I call it truth. It's the reality beyond the veneer, it's the reality beyond, this facade that most people are presenting to the world. It's truth, and it's yucky, and it's deep, and it's hard, and it's dark, but it's also the potential for potency and liberation. So if you're in a bit of an emotional funk at the moment, my suggestion would be to surrender into the emotions of whatever you're feeling. If it's grief, grieve, really grieve. Don't resist. If it's sadness, be sad. If it's anger, be angry. Right? It's the direction of your actions based on those emotions that causes challenges and difficulties. It's not the emotion itself. Example is, if you're angry and you act out of anger and hurt someone, then that is some negative karma you've created. But if you're angry and you're just angry for the sake of being angry, well, you can transmute anger into purpose, passion, creativity. Excuse me. There's a lot of uses for anger. right? Exercise. It's not the emotion that's the difficult thing. It's the actions that come from that emotion. So if you go through some heavy stuff at the moment, feel the feels, because that's how you release that energy. And that is going to feel like death. Scorpio emotion is always going to feel like death, but it's through the releasing of that emotion that you come to liberation or the rebirth that happens as a result. So, don't be afraid of the emotion. The heaviness that's going on at the moment is Saturn is stationing direct, 0 degrees Pisces. Pisces is a mutable water sign. Pisces is very emotional. Pisces is the emotional extremes, the depths and the highs. Saturn is the planet of boundaries, structure, discipline, responsibilities, commitments, restrictions, limitations, fears. I said as Saturn earlier this year, as Saturn moved into Pisces, as we'll be there for the next 2.5 years, we're going to have some heavy emotions to deal with. We're also dealing with a very karmic Saturn, endings and undoings. We're going to move into a phase as Saturn turns direct at 0 degrees Pisces and begins its second sort of pathway into Pisces. We're going to be dealing with a lot of collective karma in a lot of ways. So the point is, when Saturn or any planet in particular is stationing to turn direct or retrograde, there is an emphasis of that energy in our lives. Imagine if you have a planet at 0 degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius. Saturn is at that degree now. So it's either conjunct, opposing, or squaring. If that's a sun, your sun. I have my sun at 1 degrees Virgo, so I'm feeling Saturn, and I'm a Saturn Sun conjunction. So I know a lot about Saturn. It's hard. Saturn, hard stuff. It's difficult. But with the work, with the effort, with the discipline, with the consistency comes the reward. And Saturn is the reaper. He'll reap. He's reaping time, right? So he'll come around and he'll say time's up, and he becomes the Grim Reaper. But he's also the harvester of the season, right? So if you've been diligently working consistently and disciplined, and you've been in moderation and doing what you need to do, Saturn comes around and you reap what you sow. So if you've been sowing good seeds, you can reap good deeds. But if you haven't, this can be a heavy feeling. This can be a burden. This can be some obligation, this commitment, responsibility, restriction, where you're feeling weighed down by it all. Saturn will turn direct in about a week from now. So he's not going to move much. And that, we'll get a bit of relief in about 2 weeks from now. But in this period of time, it's heaviness. Off the back of the eclipse, heaviness. My suggestion would be to surrender into it, but don't allow it to overwhelm you completely. And if you are feeling the complete overwhelm, please get in touch, because often there is, some words that can be spoken that can just shift perspective, change the way you see things, help you to relieve a lot of the burden, carry your burden, so to speak. So you don't, if it's really dark and it's heavy, you don't have to drown under the weight of it. Reach out and, whether it's to myself or someone close to you, and just say, hey, I'm not coping. Now, in Scorpio season, there's power that comes through vulnerability. It's superpower. It's admitting the truth. Hey, I'm not coping. That is some power. Like, people, I would say 99.99% of people are very compassionate and caring, but they're also very self-centered and in their own world with their own problems and their own shit going on. And they're not really considerate of anyone else around them until such time as someone reaches out for help. And I guarantee it's like, anyone that sees someone that's struggling, whether it's a woman, they've got a flat tire or struggling with a baby or whatever, like, people generally want to help. There is exceptions to that rule, but it's very minor. And don't let media, social media or mainstream media, persuade or change the way you see humanity and the potential that we have in humanity. So, you know, reach out. There's power in vulnerability. There's a lot of strength that comes from vulnerability. So if you're feeling the emotional overwhelm, you know, you're not alone. This too shall pass. We've got, if we follow now on this chart, so this is the chart for now. What I want to quickly look at and then wrap this video up is the eclipse chart. Okay, so you turn off the transits. There's the eclipse chart. In particular, we've got this Jupiter retrograde and Uranus retrograde, both in Taurus. And the eclipse was in an alignment in conjunct to especially Uranus, okay? And as we move forward in time, we can then lay over the transits over that eclipse chart. And what I want to focus on really is the Mars-Sun conjunction that's coming up. So we're going to have a Mars-Sun new moon conjunction of Mars in almost direct opposition to Uranus. But there is a point in about, what's today, Monday, tomorrow, where Mars is going to move into an opposition with the eclipse Jupiter, right? The solar eclipse stationed Jupiter. So that's going to be an interesting flare up. Mars is aggression, it's decisiveness. Mars in Scorpio can deal with murder, violent crime, revenge, but also can be like the surgeon going in and do a decisive, direct, and very calculating sort of incision. So think of that type of thing. So when Mars is going to then hit the Jupiter eclipsed in the solar eclipse Jupiter, we're going to have this Jupiter-Mars tension, and we've got might and power. So we might have a bit of an explosive sort of eruption of martial energy in a big way. Jupiter tends to amplify things. Mars, we know he's the god of war. There is a strategic element to Mars in Scorpio. And I know from what I can see, at least in observation mode, there is a lot of information and misinformation in relation to the conflict in the Middle East. And there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of like talk and there's a lot of stuff going on. You know, Mercury is currently in opposition to Jupiter. So things are getting blown out of proportion. To be mindful of where you're focusing your attention to and what you're giving your attention to. It's okay to observe from a neutral place, from Switzerland. But if you're watching what's going on and you are emotionally reacting, that emotional reaction is feeding the very reality that you don't want. So I would say that you can observe what's going on from a neutral place, but if you are being polarized by it and having a really extreme emotional sort of feeling of overwhelm or uncertainty or worry, concern like that, you should seriously think about coming into Taurus, getting your feet on the ground and turning off the Gemini, turning off the news, turning off the media, turning off all of the information that's coming, because the information is creating what? It's unstable emotions. So be mindful of that. So the flare-up point would be Tuesday, Wednesday, as Mars moves into an opposition with Jupiter. And then following that, the Sun moving into an opposition with Jupiter, which happens in this chart. It's going to happen on the 6th of November. And if we go back, so the 4th of November is when Saturn, 4th, 5th of November, I believe, 5th of November is Saturn stationing direct, and then we're going to have Sun opposite Jupiter. So the 5th, 6th of November is another day where I would consider, big things happening, mass events, things that are like, extreme on end of things in relation to the conflict that's going on. In your own personal lives, this can be a bit of a turning point, like a breakthrough is made, and where you're faced with a particular decision and you can go that way or that way. What I would say is if you've got a situation in your life at the moment where you're faced with an ultimatum or a path of like choosing, don't choose the same path that you've already been walking. Okay? Don't choose the same path you've already been walking. The South Node eclipse is the letting go of the past. It's letting go of, coming to some pattern of behavior that's keeping you stuck in this sort of codependency situation, or this looping challenge, or this conflict. You got to take the high road. So if you're faced in your personal life between now and when's that? That's next Monday. So this week in particular, if you've got an opportunity to do something different, to take a new path or go a new direction, it may be frightening because there's always uncertainty with a new path. It's always like, what's going to happen. Scorpio requires a death before there can be a rebirth. So choosing that new direction can feel like a death. A death of what? Death of whatever that old pathway was, that old pattern, that old cycle, that old reality. There's a death of it. It has to occur. But the pathway, right, to choose something new is to choose the rebirth. And you have to confront the death or the fear of it to be able to rebirth. So if you've got something like that coming up in your life this week, where you've been faced with a decision on which way do I go, take the high road. Take the long way home. Take the long way home. Final sort of period of time will really start around the 11th of November, as Mars and Uranus will oppose each other in the sky. But then I feel like we'll build in intensity as Mars moves into the opposition with the eclipse, Uranus in particular. So the 14th of November, the 14th, so the 13th, 14th of November. 13th, that's the new moon in Scorpio. New moon in Scorpio will be at 20 degrees. So the new moon on the 13th of November, Monday, the 13th of November, 20 degrees. Mars at 22 degrees. Uranus in the eclipse chart, 22 degrees. The new moon is 20 degrees. Uranus is at 21 degrees. And then you've heard me say this before, but Uranus is aligned to pretty much every new moon now through the next 6 months. Uranus is sudden upheaval. So with Mars in opposition and the moon, sun and moon, you could expect sudden, swift, decisive, laser-like, chaotic upheaval, change, liberation. Now, on a worldwide setting, yeah, we would watch for a big flare point around that new moon, 13th, 14th, 15th, around that, or even leading into the new moon lunar phase, right? So that first 2 weeks. Look, because this new moon is being embedded with this opposition and energy. But a flare up of conflict, or conflict going, like spreading out of its case, or happening in other areas, or things that are like unexpected completely. So the unexpected sort of volatile release of energy. Now, in your own life, that energy can be quite liberating. That can be like where the blockage, Saturn's direct now. That can be like where the blockage, and it could be a consciousness block. In fact, it probably is, because if you think about Scorpio emotions, the heavy emotions, when we hold on to them, right? Insecurity, doubt, fear, anger, resentment, rage, revenge, lust, greed, power, overwhelm, regret, all that, shame, guilt, whatever. They will create an energetic block that doesn't allow the mind to perceive beyond those feelings. So then the mind is stimulated by the emotional fuel, to be focused on certain things, or to be thinking about certain things, or to be overthinking about certain things, and can only really see through the lens of that heavy energy. You process and release that force, that energy. You feel it, you move through it, you let it go, you purge it. And all of a sudden you can get this clarity, the shift of your perspective, your perception opens up. And with this new moon, there is the potential for a powerful jolt of electricity from your higher self to come down into your lower self, to illuminate an opportunity or a pathway or a new direction for you. It could be the removal of a big obstacle as well, where all of a sudden you just see clearly, or it could be the illumination of the obstacle. Oh, that's the thing that was blocking me. I didn't know that was it. Now I can see that's it. No wonder this is where I'm at and what I'm feeling. And you may be confronted then with, a pathway choice. Do I go this way? Do I go that way? The South Node, solar eclipse in Libra, right? Balancing, but where the South Node is almost like, how do I come to balance here? I've got to choose a new path. Maybe I don't choose any of those. Maybe there's a third way. In fact, there usually is a third path for you to choose. So more on this as we build towards it, but I just wanted to highlight. So this week, Tuesday in particular, following Monday, and then the new moon, the 13th, 14th, 15th, around that time. But certainly I would see with the Mars Jupiter opposition, right? So the Mars Jupiter opposition is happening in the sky at the moment, but it's also happening in this eclipse chart over this period of time. There tends to be an escalation of that martial energy. It's fired up, direct, we're courageous, we're ready to go, we're motivated, right? But also when that energy happens out in the collective, you can see what we've had. Like we've had mass shootings. I think there's been 2 in the last week or so. So those types of things and those events because what's happening, we're getting this sort of release of these subconscious sort of darker, deeper, heavier emotions, and they can come out, through martial energy, very reactive instead of responsive. People are being reactive, and that is being played on by the Matrix. That's been played on. They know what time it is. They know where things are. They know what's happening. They know what story to put up. You ever wondered why particular stories find the news and why they're presented in a particular way? And whether that's mainstream or now social, because they've infiltrated social media and it's just another platform for information and media. It's not by chance or coincidence. It's intent, because they know if they present something a certain way at a certain time, they're going to elicit a certain response. And it's the response that drives the narrative. Otherwise, it's just a story. You have to fucking believe it. But when you respond negatively, positively, emotionally to it, you create it. So that's the game here. Stop creating their story. Stop feeding the beast. If you can't observe with what's going on in the world from a place of like, interesting. Oh, that's fine. You shouldn't be observing. You should be keeping your own lane and, digging in your own garden. Anyway, that's my video for today. Hope you've enjoyed it. My name is Luke from Astro Awakening. I help people navigate their journey of awakening through astrological and symbolic, occult wisdom, knowledge, understanding, helping you find your wisdom and understanding through presenting knowledge in a certain way. And when I look at your chart, I see the real you. I see your challenges and difficulties, and I can bring that to light and confront, come on, this is how we do this. This is the path we go. This is the way you do it. So some people, that's quite confronting. For other people, they want that. I really enjoy what I do. I love what I do. I love helping people. I love being that support. So if you're looking for the support in your life and you want to get clarity and focus and you want to get drive and direction and you want to make the changes you need to make to liberate yourself or step onto your path of self-actualization, I'm your fucking guy. On that note, peace out. Cheers.